Hi there, and welcome to Real Talk in ELT, a podcast about the reality of teaching English. I'm your host, Kelly Pennington. Thank you for joining me today. Welcome, and today we are going to be looking at some solutions for students who think they know more than their teacher, and this is based only on my experience. I'd like to start with an anecdote to tell you something that happened to me, and maybe some of you might be able to relate. So I had a student, I was working in a language school, and I had a student that came in. It was him and a coworker, and they wanted to take classes together, and they needed kind of a basic or a beginner course. Both of them were very nice in the beginning. They're very skilled professionals. They worked in as specialists in the business area, and they needed English because it was going to be some sort of career boost for them to possibly go to international markets and things like that. So we started the course, and I had the constraints of working in the language school, so I was not able to really do a full needs analysis on these students. I wasn't able to use materials that I thought were more appropriate. It was, I had to use the course book that was given to me, and everything was based off of a proficiency test. So the school that I was working for, it was a private English school. It was a very good school, but there was a very big emphasis on grammar, vocabulary, accuracy, and those types of things. So that's kind of the background story. So we got started doing the course, and one of the gentlemen in this group was not doing his homework. And the other one was, but the other one, let me just label them student A and student B so you can follow the story. So student A was the manager of student B, and student B was the employee, and he was doing his homework and he was following the course. He had more organizational skills, he was better at time management, and he seemed to have more of an interest in the language, which comes off as having more aptitude, that he was getting it quicker than student A. But he wasn't. He was just spending a little bit more time with it. I think he just was generally interested in learning English a bit more. So student A was not doing his homework. He insisted on using a laptop in class instead of a notebook or his regular books. He wasn't interested. He wanted to do all of the activities, everything he wanted to do in his laptop. I think he had this very big misconception that business people need to be working on their laptops all the time, and he was very adverse to using pen and paper, even when the activities required you just to actually write something down. It would be much easier. He didn't want to take any of the tests, and when he did take the test, he preferred to use his laptop and word processing, and I was not comfortable with that because obviously there's some spell corrections, and there's all of the technology now that will help you with constructing sentences and things like that. So I really just wanted him to write something, and he absolutely refused. It was not something I chose to fight on. So he did not want to take notes, and he wanted only to have conversations and to use authentic materials from things like the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times. They worked in the accounting area. So I was dealing with a student who was very adverse to any new suggestions. He was not willing to work with me or compromise on a lot of things. I had constraints from the school in terms of their curriculum and the materials, and it was just a very frustrating situation for me. Overall, he was not making much progress, and I could see the frustration, and every time he would get more and more frustrated, he would put more and more constraints on what he was willing to do in the classroom. So I would try to use different approaches. I tried literally every framework of a lesson plan that I could think of or I could find. I included the requested materials, so that he wanted authentic materials like the Wall Street Journal and Financial Times newspapers, so I would adapt them and grade the language down so that we were able to use them in class. I was consulting with the coordinator and with other teachers at the time to try and find a solution, but There was frustration building on both sides. So finally, it came to kind of a tipping point, and I had a conversation with him. I said, listen, this is not working, and I know that you're getting frustrated and I'm getting frustrated. I'm trying to see what you are willing to do. I'm trying to find a solution for your learning style, and also for you to feel comfortable like you're trying to reach your objectives. But I'm working with a lot of constraints here. So I really just want to communicate with you what's going on, and let's try and find a solution together. The conversation was a little bit one-sided. While I was making suggestions, he wasn't really being flexible. He would try to dictate how the lessons would go. And at some point, you have to be inflexible with students because they can't dictate how you run your classroom. Like I tried to be flexible in introducing lots of different approaches, techniques, different types of activities, and overall, there was just a lot of frustration on both sides. I wasn't really able to figure out what the student wanted or needed because it seemed to me that he changed every class. And he was getting frustrated because he obviously wasn't seeing the progress that he wanted to make. So I tried to stick at least for a month or two for each different type of approach that I was doing. And so it was unsuccessful in general. So the way that the school worked where I was teaching, at the end of the semester, there was this rodizio of teachers. So we would change. So classes would not get super comfortable with one specific teacher and one specific style. They would go from teacher to teacher, and that was how it worked. So they ended up going to a different teacher, and within a month, they requested to come back to me because they were not able to, connect or have any rapport with that specific teacher. And I don't honestly, looking back on it, I don't blame the teacher at all. I feel like they were a very difficult case. So when they came back to me, the coordinator asked, would you be willing to teach these two again? And I gave some conditions because I felt as if it was going to be the same thing over and over again. And I didn't want, to have the school's reputation be tarnished because these students are obviously not getting what they need, and it was a difficult scenario. So I said, listen, they are more than welcome to come back to my class. I'm more than willing to try and teach them and get them to where they need to be, but they are not allowed to hijack my classes. I try to give them flexibility. I wanted them to have a voice. I wanted to be a partner with them in their education, but that's not going to happen anymore. So we need to stick to what the school believes and use the curriculum and use the methodology and all of the approaches and techniques that we believe in as teachers here at the school. And the coordinator agreed with me because when I previously had them, the coordinator says, well, just, try whatever they're suggesting and see if it works for them and then adapt. So I had a lot of flexibility, but at the same time, it obviously wasn't working because students don't necessarily know what is best for them. So then they came back to my class, and about 2 weeks afterwards, they were doing good, and they were making progress, and you could see that they were really engaging in the materials, and they were able to produce some language. And then, unfortunately, it went back to the old scenario of, I don't like this, stopping in the middle of class, not participating, not doing, just generally the behavior and the dynamic in the class wasn't good. So I went to the coordinator again, and I told the coordinator I was having the same issues. And it wasn't beneficial for me. It wasn't beneficial for the students because they obviously were getting frustrated. I was getting frustrated. No one was reaching their goals in this scenario. So we really needed to find a different solution. The coordinator, I do believe, either took the class or sent to another teacher, and the students ended up leaving, unfortunately. However, from what I know, they tried to come back to the school after about a semester. So I think they went to another school and they tried another school's methodology, another school's teacher, and they ended up obviously not liking them and tried to come back to the school and actually tried to have classes again with me. And at that point, I refused, the coordinator refused. It just wasn't a good situation. It wasn't a healthy learning environment, so it wasn't going to work out. So in summary, from this experience, it was difficult and it was challenging. I think that I grew a little bit as a person and also as an educator. And some of my final thoughts about how to deal with really difficult students that, try to dictate the methodology, try to dictate what you do in classes and all of that. Here's what I learned from it. I think it's necessary for us to change approaches and use different techniques because obviously students are individuals and they learn in a specific way and everybody has their own specific way of learning. So in that respect, I think that teachers need to be flexible because we need to look at the needs and the wants and the necessities of the student and not be rigid with what we believe in, but also try to adapt the materials and the coursework to individuals. I thought it was really, really helpful for me, and I got comfortable with using some different frameworks for my lesson plans. And though it wasn't successful with this duo, it was successful in other classes. So I really like the idea of changing up a framework and doing different stages and using different approaches when you're doing your lesson plan, because I think it helps create some variety and keeps the students on their toes, and then you'll be able to do classes in a little bit of a different way. So I thought that was great, and I thought that was a really good solution. It didn't necessarily work with this group, but it has helped me in future classes. I like to include stimulating materials, things that definitely get the students excited about what they're learning so they can see the impact of learning the language. All of the materials, like authentic materials and outside materials that I bring into a language course, if I'm using a book with a class or if I'm, developing materials, all of those resources, I like to get input from the students. And I think that's important so that you have lots of their preferences represented in the classroom. During this whole process, I was forced to collaborate with the teachers and administrators at the school, and I was given a lot of great advice and some different perspectives, as well as some different options. So I think collaboration, if you're having difficulties with some students, regardless if they're trying to dictate how to teach them or if they're, just not being collaborative in class, I think collaboration with your peers will sometimes give you some different ideas. Unfortunately, we had this situation. It was quite a difficult one, but as a private teacher, I am not afraid to suggest that students go and work with other teachers. Perhaps it's the personality or style that just doesn't match, and maybe it's a better fit with another teacher. I don't take it personally. I used to, but I don't anymore because I know that I don't like working with some individuals as well. So if they're paying for a language course, then they really have to have nice rapport and have to have a good relationship with the teacher. So unfortunately, it happens, and you need to know what you're willing to be flexible on and what you're not willing to do in your class. So you need to be able to negotiate the terms in your classroom and really take a stance if necessary. And also finally, unfortunately, it's the reality of it, but just be willing to lose a student. Sometimes it happens, whether it be for obligations, they don't have time, or if it doesn't work, if it's not a personality fit, sometimes the person needs to find another teacher that can really help them reach their language goals. It's not a personal thing, it's a professional thing. You're providing a service for them, and maybe your personalities don't match, and that's okay, because you don't get along with all your coworkers, so sometimes you don't get along with all your students as well. And sometimes there's another professional that's better prepared to help them in their language classes. Well, that's it. I've reached the end of this episode. Hopefully my story has helped you, and some of the suggestions and things that I learned will help you with some of your more difficult students. Thank you for joining me this week. I will be back next episode with some real talk on lesson planning and some tips on how to save time. Ready to join the conversation? Head on over to Instagram at Real Talk in ELT Podcast, or on @EnglishWithKelly and send me a message. That's it for me. Take care of yourself, your health, your vibe, and your tribe. Until next time.